Amber, how do you think people's relationships with food mirrors their relationship with themselves?
That's a great question, and I think it is definitely one that does have that mirror. When you are struggling with food, as I did for so many years, it really impacts your confidence. So I think it can goes both ways. Where when you were struggling with food, I struggled with overeating, with binge eating, with restricting, with bulimia, really everything on the spectrum. It starts to impact your self-trust because I told myself so many times over and over again, I won't eat extra today. I'll stick to my diet, I'll stick to my meal plan, and then I did. And so it started to degrade my self-trust. So I think it can go that way, but it can also go the other way where when you are struggling with self-confidence, sometimes we can use food as a way of control, as a form to try to make us feel like our life is better than it actually is. And it's something that we can decide, okay, I'm gonna have this many calories, I'm gonna have this type of food, I'm gonna put on these restrictions and these rules to create this artificial way of control. And a lot of times, if we're struggling with our self image or feeling out of control in our life, maybe someone was divorced or their partner left them, and then they go to food to start to get that control back. So I
Mm.
think it can go both ways, where our relationship with food can impact our relationship with ourselves, but then our relationship with ourselves can also impact our relationship with food.
Yeah, definitely a two-way thing. And you spoke about confidence in there. So the thing that you do is you work with people to make them confident eaters, right?
Mhm.
Where does confidence and food sort of intertwine?
Yeah, so I started the name Confident Eater because for so long around food, I felt unconfident. I was thinking about food all day. I couldn't eat without looking at my calorie counter. I would binge. And so every time that I encountered food, I just felt like I didn't know what to do. I had so many questions around food. There was so much food noise there. And so, in order to be someone who was this like normal eater, the people who could have one chip and move on from the bag. And you just were like, how did they do that? How did they not go back for more? I want to be like them. And so I created this term of the confident eater to really talk about someone who's confident in their eating habits, who can decide to have the portion that feels good to them and move on, who can listen to their hunger and fullness, who can have the confidence in their body because they're not overeating and gaining additional weight from it. So
Mm.
I work with a lot of people on both confidence in like whatever body size they're at right now and getting to where they want to be, but also just feeling this like confidence and self-trust around food too, because that's what makes food easy and makes it so it's not such a struggle anymore.
Mm. I suppose it shows up either side of food, doesn't it? The confidence, like you say, to know that you can manage what you're going to eat and control going into food, like before you sort of dig in. And then afterwards, the confidence that gives you. And it's like a sort of cycle, I suppose, isn't it? It just reignites the next one.
Mhm.
Talk about your own journey then. So you sort of mentioned a little bit in there about your how you were yourself, but what sort of led you into this area of work?
Mhm. So back in 2015, I started by wanting to lose weight. And it was very innocent, like I just want to lose 10 pounds or so. And I went onto the internet and I Googled, okay, how do you lose weight? Calories in, calories out. All right, I'm going to start counting calories and I'm going to move and exercise more. And it seems so simple on the surface. And I did lose weight. But a lot of times, the calorie counters, there's a lot of science behind it, but basically, our body doesn't always respond very well to that. And especially, a lot of us are going on much more extreme calorie deficits than sustainable to our body. So, what happens to our survival brain is your survival brain just thinks food is disappearing off the face of the planet Earth, and I better eat as much as I can right now before that happens. So, then I started getting these really strong urges to eat. And my first binge happened around Christmas time. I remember I walked downstairs, there was chocolate chip cookies on the counter, and I promised myself, okay, I'm just gonna have one and then I'll be good after that. But then I got this overwhelming desire. I felt like I was like a ghost out of my body, and I had another and another and another until I had 7 of those cookies. And I was like, okay, not gonna do it again until it happened next week, and then the next week, and then it started happening every day. Where I was binging like thousands of calories and I didn't know how to stop. I thought I was just broken. I thought I just need to try harder. And so the first place I went was therapy, and that's where most people go. But unfortunately, therapy did not really work for me. I went through multiple eating disorder therapists for many years, and the thing about therapy is it's a lot of focus on your past. For most people, I find your eating issues aren't actually stemming from this like period of trauma or, a hard childhood. That might be part of it, like for some other things, but for eating, it tends to be you went on a diet, you learned certain mindsets around food, around good and bad and all or nothing, and your brains have started to create this fear around food scarcity, and that
Mm.
led to overeating. After I left therapy, I was going out on my own to try to find a different solution. And it's when I came across this blog post that described binge eating as just a habit. That everything we do, whether it's a thought, a feeling, or action, can be habitualized in our brain and make it so we do it on autopilot. And that is what was happening around food for me. And really, that made my journey so much more simple because I didn't feel like I had to get my ducks in a row in every single area of life. I didn't have to figure out my entire childhood. Therapy made it seem so much bigger. And so many of the other approaches too I can go over just really didn't get to the root cause of it. But when I started looking at the only difference between me right now and someone who doesn't struggle with food is I have these habituated urges around it that make me want to do it because it's my habit, and the other people don't. They don't have the habit, so they don't have the desire to do it.
Hmm.
So then my work became, well, how do I sit with these urges? A big mistake people make is they try to go looking for all of their triggers so they can avoid the triggers. It's good to know what triggers you because that's what activates the habit pathway. But if you're going to avoid all of them, for example, anytime I go to a big party, I overeat, or anytime I'm around my mother-in-law, I overeat, then we're making our life very small if we have to avoid all of things. When
Mm.
really, what we know about the brain now is that in order for change to happen, we have to be triggered. If you were to just sit in a cave all day, you might not overeat, but you're not going to change anything about your brain. You literally have to feel triggered and take a different action in order for that brain pathway to be rewired. So that's what I did. I started putting myself in these hard situations. I brought in the Oreos into my house and I thought, okay, it's going to feel difficult at first to not binge on them because every time I've had Oreos in my house in the past, I binged. But if I can change my relationship to this food and do something different that literally rewires our brain into new brain pathways and new habits, that makes it easier to start to become this person as a confident eater.
Mm. And you spoke about that feeling when you sort of first looked at yourself from maybe a third person view and sort of thought, I'm broken or what's wrong with me. Now, looking on your website, that's one of the first things that it says there is you are not broken.
Mm-hmm.
And that's naturally where human beings go to, right? If there's something that they see is slightly different about them, they'll say they're wrong or they're broken.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so important for you to point that bit out and to correct that way of thinking?
Right. After so many years of doing different approaches to try to stop binge eating, you do start to feel broken after a while because you're like, well, I thought therapy was supposed to work for me. Some other things I tried were intuitive eating, and I do teach a more intuitive eating approach where I teach people how to listen to their hunger and fullness. But traditional intuitive eating is just very unstructured. And when I did it that way, I just binged and binged and binged, and I just kept eating more. So I need a little bit more structure around my eating habits. I also tried going sugar free. I thought if sugar was the problem, I might as well just cut it out. I tried intermittent fasting, I'm eating a lot at night. Let's just try telling myself to not eat at night and see how that works. But all of these things were not addressing really the mindset around food and again, these urges. So it's really important to remind yourself that you're not the one that's broken. Sometimes you're just using the wrong tools. Like if you're trying to build a house with a spoon, it's not going to really work. You're not going to have enough strength and power and to build a strong foundation that you need with food.
Mm.
And when we feel like there's just something wrong with us, this is what I call the shame bubble that comes over us. And when we're in the shame bubble, we just can't see our way out. We can't do anything. We just feel stuck. We feel like we just want to lie in bed all day, eat snacks, and give up on life, because we just can't see that there's not something wrong with us and that is really just an action that we're taking that we can stop taking if we have the right tools and support for it. So once you can see, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm just doing a habit that I've had formed for many years, then that allows us to remove the shame and just start to look at things a little bit more factually. I like to remind people that all you're doing when you're overeating is eating food. No one here is like kicking puppies, stealing candy for a kid. You're just eating food. And there is nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a bad person or a bad human.
Mm.
It's just something you're doing. And yes, it might be more food than your body needs. But again, that doesn't make you a bad person. It's just an action you're taking.
Yeah, for sure. I love the idea of the shame bubble and sort of not being able to see outside of it as well. And it's
Mhm.
almost reflecting back what your thoughts are about yourself.
Yeah.
Are there any parts of you when you were a binge eater that you're grateful for now, looking back in hindsight?
I love that question because I know so many of the times my clients, they regret struggling with food and they wish that they would have gotten out of this sooner, but it does build a lot of skills too. If I had not been a binge eater, I would not have come out of it and be able to do what I do now and help so many people overcome it. So I think your story can oftentimes help so many other people heal, and you going through it, coming out of it, getting support is a way to help really globally heal people if you share about it. And that's not always something everyone wants to do, but it is something that can make your journey more meaningful, is to like offer support to other people, tell
Mm.
people how you've changed. But it also gave me a lot of mindset tools that I would have never encountered had I not come into this. So once I found that binge eating could just be a habit, I started working with this coach. And the coach introduced me to the world of life coaching and the mindset work, and truly how our thoughts, feelings, and actions are all related. And this work really rippled out to every single other area of my life. It rippled out to just my confidence in general, how I dated and my security with that. It rippled out to my finances, my friendships, like truly every other area of life was able to change and improve because I had these basic mindset skills that I didn't have before. And I started to realize that it wasn't the circumstances of our life that were making us feel a certain way, it was our thoughts. And the biggest thing I learned through my binge eating struggles is that just because we have a thought doesn't mean it's true. Just because my
Mhm.
brain is telling me it needs a lot of food right now, that doesn't mean my body actually needs a lot of food. And this happens in so many other areas where our brain is just telling us things all day long that we believe as a fact that just aren't. And it's really causing a lot of pain in our life when we don't have that separation from those thoughts and we can see it as this thought is optional. I don't have to believe this right now. And that's something that going through the struggle with food really taught me.
It's massively true in any sense of it, whether you're in a good place mentally or a bad place mentally, that voice in your mind tells you these things. It basically commentates on every single thing you do in life. And
Mhm.
quite often, more often than not, I'd say it's a negative thing. So that understanding that you don't have to listen to it and it's probably not true, um, and sort of looking at it objectively and just sort of moving on with it, is really important and really powerful. If there was someone out there that sort of is falling into those sort of binge eating habits and behaviors, but maybe they haven't noticed it yet, or maybe they've sort of unconsciously shut it off in their mind, is there any sort of signs that that might be happening for them?
Yeah. So, according to statistics, about 3% of the US population struggles with binge eating. So, it's a pretty large portion. If you think about
Yeah.
how many people there are, that is a big portion. But we know also that two-thirds of the US is also obese or overweight. I think that actually might have went up to three-fourths of the US population. So, there's something going on here. And there's a lot of other factors that we could discuss within that. But for most people, they are overeating to some degree. Now, the big difference between overeating and binge eating is a few things. Binge eating tends to happen in a lot larger quantities. So it's defined as a large quantity of food, more than most people would think as normal, which isn't of itself pretty objective or subjective. But so it's a bigger quantity of food than most people would consider normal within a 2 hour time span in a way that feels out of control, frantic. So there's a lot of like loss of you feel like you can't do anything about it. So
Mm.
if those things are happening for you, then you could be struggling with binge eating. And a lot of people might not resonate always with the term binge eating. So sometimes I call myself a binge eating and overeating coach because I honestly bounced between both, where sometimes it was true binge eating. I was eating 3,000 calories, everything in the cabinets. But sometimes it was just like I had a few extra cookies, but I ate them like really frantically in 4 bites. And I felt really guilty after. I felt really ashamed. Then maybe I went into all or nothing thinking, and then I had more food later that day. So I really qualify it as If you're eating more food than you want to be eating and you don't feel good about it, there's probably help out for that, and there is a way to change. If you're not
Mm.
happy with your eating habits, then there is a different alternative. And this is with any area of our life, that if you can imagine a different reality, then that different reality exists, and there is a way that you can get there.
Mm. When you were speaking about your own journey as well, you spoke about how you tried sort of therapy, you tried a number of things before you sort of worked out what worked for you. And again, that's a really important point, I think, to point out, is that the approach for everyone's going to be different, right? Everyone is a different person. They're unique. So looking back on it for yourself, is there anything that you wish someone would have told you before you went on that journey of sort of finding what worked for you?
I actually don't know if I would, because I had to go through those things in order to find out that they didn't work.
Hmm.
I think I might have had in the back of my head that, oh, well, it's still just the sugar. I just need to go sugar free. But I kind of had to try that out to realize this isn't working still. And I learned very quickly you can still binge on other foods that aren't sugary, and you can still overeat on even broccoli or protein. It's possible if you don't address the mindset first.
Yeah.
So I do wish someone had pointed out to me that there's a lot of thoughts that are going underneath this that are causing my binge eating. But I do think that by being able to go through each of those things, I learned along the way why they didn't work. And it made it so much more clear to me why I needed to take this approach of looking at the mindset and that it's just a habit, and really learning that my urges are the things I need to work on. Now, if someone is going through this now and they are like wanting some advice of some things that they can remember, a few things that are important to know about urges. Your urges are three things. They are harmless, they are powerless, and they are meaningless. Why this is so important to know is because this makes them less hard to deal with. When I got an urge to binge, I would literally lay on my floor, I would cry, and I would like lock myself into the room because it felt so hard to not eat. And it really didn't need to be that hard. I wish I had more tools and skills around that. So if we look at our urges as first, they're powerless, meaning they don't make us do anything. We have two parts of our brain for simplicity purposes here. We have our higher brain, we have our lower brain. Our higher brain is the part of us that can plan ahead, that thinks about our goals, our future. And a really important function of our higher brain too is it controls our actions. Meaning we learn from the age of 2 that if we hit someone or pinch someone or bite someone, that is our choice. We can choose not to do that. And that we have control of our motor skills. Then we have our lower part of our brain that is automatic, that is habitual, that is responsible for keeping us alive and making everything as easy as possible. Now, this controls things like our heart rate and our breathing that we can or can't control to a certain degree, but our motor movements, like what our arms do, whether or not we go grab the food, is in our control. So what I mean by urges are powerless, urges are coming from this lower part of our brain that is habitual and automatic. It's running on autopilot. Your urge is saying, I need a lot of food right now. I need to binge because I binged every single day for the past couple of years. That is not a logical thing. That is just coming because your brain is predicting that that's what you'll want to do again tonight, because our brains are predictive machines. But our higher brain knows, well, I'm not going to feel good after that. I don't actually want to eat all this food. That's not going to be fun. We don't know that unless we start using our higher brain and we can see the separation between these two parts of our brain. So when we're having these thoughts about food, it's important to remember that you have full motor control in that function. You are not a ghost out of your body, even though it felt like that way to me. One of my favorite things I like to do with my clients is just have them sit on their hands, like under their legs. And this is not necessarily to not eat the food, but it does kind of have that effect. It's really good, like if you're at a dinner table or something and you're starting to get an urge for seconds when you're not hungry.
Okay.
But I like this because if you're thinking like, touch my nose, touch my nose, touch my nose, you can't touch your nose until you give your brain the okay, lift up my hands underneath my legs and touch my nose. You have to give your brain the okay to move your body in order for it to happen. So that's just good to know that our urges can't make us do anything. Again, just because we have a thought doesn't mean it's true. And just because we have a thought doesn't mean it can drive our actions if we put that pause in. The next, they're harmless, meaning they can't hurt us. So again, we can sit here all day and think about food, think about food, and we're going to be okay. I literally like to remind myself that I'm not going to die. I'm gonna be okay, which can sound a bit extreme sometimes, but it does sometimes feel like if I don't do this habit right now, I literally feel like I'm gonna die. So reminding yourself, I'm safe. These are just thoughts that are creating feelings in my body and I'm gonna be okay. So we have they're harmless, they're powerless, and then finally they're meaningless. They're meaningless meaning we don't need to go too deep into them. They're not that serious. Yes, it is good to get awareness around them and to kind of evaluate what they're saying sometimes. And that's what I do a lot with people in coaching. But they're not like, we don't want to get an urge and say, oh my gosh, this must mean I'm so unhappy in life today. Maybe it means that, but a lot of the times for people I work with, it just no. Again, you binged every single night for the past 5 years. Of course you want to do it tonight. That is not a surprise. That is just your brain going on its autopilot loop. And so when we can start to see how they're just like not that important, they're not that serious, they're just kind of like junk mail that's coming by, just like floating in our head, we don't take them as seriously and then they don't feel as hard to deal with.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you could get to a point, I suppose, where you're still having the sort of exact same thoughts that you need to eat stuff, but because you've changed that, what you would say the higher brain, you're overriding that then, where before you weren't sort of ready enough to stop yourself making that actual action for it. And like by doing things like sitting on your hands, that's a physical reminder as well. And then you sort of build that thing where you've still got the same things happening, but you change the outcome, right?
Yes, exactly. You hit it right on the nail on the head, where you actually want to expect at first that you're going to get an urge. A big mistake I see people making is they think, oh, I know all this stuff now. I'm just not going to have urges. You are absolutely 100% guaranteed to have an urge again because that's how you've trained your brain. So we want to expect that we're going to have one so we don't get surprised. Because when we get surprised, oh my gosh, I can't believe I want to eat again tonight at 8 p.m. It's like, it puts us more into drama mode when it's like, of course that's going to happen. So if we can expect that's going to happen, then we can feel prepared of, oh, okay, I'm going to sit through this. My brain is going to tell me it wants food. It has to go into that trigger and go through the same thing. But when I choose not to act on it, it literally deconditions that brain pathway because our brain learns and it updates in that moment, like a Google document. It deletes that and says, wait a second, she doesn't want to do that anymore. She just told me that because she didn't eat the food, that's no longer a habit she wants to have. Well, I better start to decondition this brain pathway to save my energy for a habit she does want to have. So literally every single time we do that, it rewires and unconditions that brain pathway until it eventually fades away.
So talking of this sort of the mindset around it, and it's a massive part of it by the sounds of it. If someone started working with you or someone started on this journey and they're doing quite well, I don't know how long it might have been, a week or two, say, and then they have what they might call a bad day. So they might have a relapse into binging again or overeating on a day. How would you suggest they stop that mindset, then taking them back into that, of that feeling of being a failure in that moment?
Yeah. So that's when a lot of times the all or nothing thinking will come up of like, I'm a failure. I've already ruined it. I've been bad today. I might as well keep going. So the first thing we want to do for that is we want to look at, have you actually been bad? Have you actually done something wrong? Sometimes people just have so much food guilt because they've learned a billion different rules around food. Bananas are bad. All carbs are bad. Chicken is bad. Maybe somewhere out there, broccoli is bad too. So we have all these different rules. So sometimes we can feel like we're doing something really wrong when really we haven't really done that much wrong. Like maybe we overate a tiny bit, but it's not that big of a deal. So the first thing I always like to take people through is, did I actually do something wrong here? Because maybe we just are having that food guilt, but maybe you actually did. Let's say you had like a full-blown binge. You ate like all of the things that you really did not want to eat. Your body feels really sluggish and heavy and exhausted because you just ate all that food. You know for sure you did something that you didn't want to do. In that case, we want to start to look at what will happen if we continue to stay in this hopelessness, if we beat ourselves up, because a lot of these times these thoughts pretend to be helpful. We think that these thoughts are going to motivate us into taking a positive action. That if I just like beat myself to the ground right now, if I tell myself how horrible I am and how fat I am and how much of a loser I am, that I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to make my life better. That never happens or rarely. If it does happen, it's usually because you do have a motivating thought come back in of like, you can do this. It's possible. It's usually another thought comes in alongside that. But very rarely when we're beating ourselves up and telling ourselves how bad we did today and how much of a failure we are, do we get up and do something positive. That's usually when we say, you know what, there's no hope for me. So I might as well keep going. What is the use in trying? So it's important to see and recognize, where does my brain take me when I'm having those thoughts? So you can show your brain how, I know you think that these thoughts are helpful and that they're going to get you to take positive action, but what happens in reality here? And then we can kind of see, okay, this is why I don't want to think that.
Mm.
And then instead, we want to look at what happens if we talk kindly to ourselves. Now, talking kindly to ourselves after we overeat does not mean we have to love the fact that we overate. It just means we're accepting that it happened and that we are going to look at it with curiosity now to figure it out. Of course, you don't love that you overate. Of course, it's upsetting. Of course, it's frustrating. That makes sense. But if we start to like beat ourselves down and make it mean something about us and our ability to do this, that's
Yeah.
when we're going to give up. So I always love curiosity. Curiosity is one of the most helpful emotions we can have in any area of life, whether it's around food, whether you're struggling at work that day, whether you messed up in another area of life and like messed up, we messing up is up to our brain and what we're deciding if it is or not.
Yeah.
But if we can just sit there and say, I wonder what might have happened here. What might have been going on? What might have I been thinking when I overate then? That is going to give us so much more insights than anything else. And even if you just write out, I call it a thought download, which is just getting your thoughts on paper, it will help your brain start to process that event and move you forward. Now, if you're doing this over and over again and you're not making progress, you might need a coach to help you. Because a lot of times, like, this is why I still have coaches in other areas, because we have a hard time seeing our own brain. I like to compare it to like, you're stuck inside a glass bottle and you're looking at the words on the bottle from the inside. You can't read what it says. You can't read the label of it because you're in it. You don't know how to get out of it. And a coach can come in and say, oh, look, this is what I'm seeing on the outside of the bottle. Here's what the words say. And then you can say, oh, okay, I get it now. So sometimes we just need a different perspective to understand what's going on after we overeat that we might not be able to see because we're in our own heads all day.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. I've never thought of that before. And that discussion around like failure. So obviously it comes down to, again, like the story that we tell ourselves. And people say it a lot, and I've said it before about this whole, there's no such thing as failure, because if you can reframe it into a way where what you used to say was failure is now just a growth opportunity or an opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, okay, so I did slip back into my old habits today, but that doesn't change me as a person. It doesn't change that my motivations are still to get out of those habits.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that maybe I was underslept and that led to me doing it. So next time I need to make sure that I sleep properly, or whatever it might be. You can learn something out of it.
Absolutely. I was going to share one more analogy about all or nothing thinking that I think is really helpful for people. Is imagine that you ran over a nail and your tire popped on your car. You're not going to go to that and say, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad driver. I just shouldn't be on the road. Let me just cut all my other tires open so I can never drive again. No one has to worry about me. No, you would just be like, oh my gosh, okay, I'll fix my tire. I'll figure it out. But that's what we're usually doing around food, is we say, yep, look, no hope for me. I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to keep eating. It just look at the damage that's been done, learn what happened, grow from it, fix it, and move on. And that's what we really need to do, is like contain it in. We don't have to make it mean all of our other tires are bad just because one got ruined. It's like, just fix the tire that was popped and then let the other tires be, and don't drag it into every other area of life.
Yeah, I'm loving these analogies. They're awesome. So if someone's listening now and they might not be at a stage where they think they're overeating massively, but they maybe just want to get in control of their food a little bit more, what's one sort of easy thing that they could start to do to help them get to that?
Mm-hmm. Something I love to do with my clients is a very simple food diary. I call it the 4 W's food diary. So it's looking at when you eat, where you eat, what you eat, and why. This is much different than calorie counting or a meal plan or something else. I don't really care what you're eating or how much. It's to help you build awareness. And awareness, as we all know, is the first step to change. I like to think of awareness as putting the "You Are Here" sticker on a map, right? So you're like, I want to change my eating habits. I want to be better. Okay, but where are you right now? We need to know where you are on the park map so you can know, okay, this is the path of where I want to go and how to get out of it. And people, when they do the food diary, that alone can change so much for them, where they really start to see, oh, maybe I'm doing a lot better than I thought and I need to celebrate myself. Or, oh, I didn't even notice that I was having a snack every single day at 3 p.m. and I don't actually think I'm hungry at that time. Let me start looking at that this week. And I like to look at more than just like the what you're eating, because there's more to that. It's good to notice like your meal timing. So maybe if you're going like 7 hours without eating and then you're having a big overeat after that, it's like, oh, well, I was probably really hungry then. And so maybe I would do better having a snack in between. So that's why it's good to look at the timing, the where you're eating. It can be good to look at, oh, do I notice if I'm eating in front of the TV, I actually overeat a lot more? Or do I notice that if I sit down at a table, that I'm actually more present with my food and I feel more satisfied after, and getting those insights. And then finally, the why you're eating. Of course, that's always the most important, like to see what percentage of the time was I hungry for food? And then you can work on increasing that percentage. So maybe if I only ate when I was hungry 50% of the time this week, maybe I can try 60% of the time next week. And you can use that as like a way to track data. Or maybe you have some thoughts that came up of, oh, I'm feeling so guilty. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I feel like I'm never going to get this cookie again. So I wanted to eat it all right now because I'm scared the diet starts tomorrow. Then you have a lot more awareness around those thoughts, and you can start to look at, are these thoughts true? What would be more helpful to think instead? What would get me closer to my goals? So that's something that's super simple that you can do to help you start to get that awareness.
Yeah, it's just digging into that reason behind what you're doing. So you mentioned it in that aspect. You mentioned it right at the start as well about calorie counting. So
Mhm.
you said how it sort of led to issues maybe for yourself previously and how it can become a fixation. Do you still see it as a useful tool in some scenarios? How would you look at calorie counting?
Absolutely. And that is just what it is. It's a tool. It is something that can be used for helpful things in some situations and not so helpful things in other situations where we no longer need that tool. So I do think it is useful for most people to have some general calorie awareness. It is good to know, like the first time you're like, oh my gosh, this is 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. I would have no idea. It's good to kind of see that awareness piece,
Mm.
but we really don't need as in-depth of calorie knowledge as we might imagine. And same thing with like protein. It's good to see like, oh, this is the amount of protein I needed a day. Like I would not have known that had I not, tracked calories for a little bit. But it comes to the point where we start putting the calorie counter on a higher pedestal than our own body's signals. And that's when it becomes
Mm.
a problem. When we start seeing the calorie counter and it says, you don't have any more calories today, so you can't eat. And we say, yep, guess I'm hungry. Doesn't matter. I got to stay good and I got to not eat anymore today. Or on the flip side, something else that would happen to me is as I kind of increase my calories too, is I'd say, well, I have an extra 150 calories today. I'm not really hungry, but I'm for sure going to go find something to eat because I'm allowed it now. So then I was putting what this random thing from the internet said over what my unique body has to say. And that's when
Hmm.
it becomes a problem because our body knows best. I like to say that our hunger and fullness signals are the best, most accurate calorie counter in the world because they're the only one who could tell us exactly what we need that day. The calorie counter doesn't know how much we exercise that day. Now, okay, some people have those fancy watches and then they tell them and it forms their calorie counter, but it's still not going to be 100% accurate. On the labels on food, it's something like they can have I don't know if I'm going to say the statistic wrong, but it's either 10 or 30%. It is a large margin of error on what the calories can actually be. Basically
Mm.
meaning like if it says 200 calories on the package, it might actually be 230, but they just wanted a nice round even number and they were allowed to do that. So it's not even that accurate. Like when we're trying to figure it out. So it's not a tool that's ultimately going to work long term because no one wants to be. I've never met anyone who said, Amber, I just can't wait to count calories for the next 60 years of my life. No one wants to do that. It takes a long time. It's boring. It's annoying. It's hard to go out to eat. No one wants to do it. It's just they feel like they need to do that in order to reach their goals. If you're trying to become like a competitive bodybuilder, like extreme athlete, maybe you do need to do it to reach your goals. But if you're just an everyday person who wants to find their healthy, happy weight and feel really good in their body, you don't need the calorie counters. You have so much wisdom already inside of your body. Humans survived on Earth for tens of thousands of years without ever knowing what a calorie was. We only
Mm.
discovered that vitamins existed in the early 1900s. Like we didn't even know that vitamin C existed. And yet we still survived throughout that. So that
Yeah.
shows us that our bodies have a lot of innate wisdom. It's not that nutritional knowledge we all need to throw out the window. We can still use it, but just remembering too that our bodies always know so much more than we ever imagined, and they do have everything we need to make those food decisions.
For sure, echoing exactly what you said about it being a tool, and like my past work was in personal training, and again, it's a common thing that people sort of ask about around nutrition, and like you said, it's just I think for a period of time, maybe a month or two, just to get an awareness of calories,
Mhm.
and then once you have that understanding, you don't actually need it to be around beyond that, and that's where the fixation starts to happen, isn't it? When you're looking at those numbers. And I
Right.
think it's a really common thing now as well, where we're relying on technology to lead our lives. So I've had it with like my watch and stuff,
Mhm.
where for a period it updated itself and started to show me first thing in the morning a sleep report of how I slept. And I would always start my day by looking at it and going, oh, wasn't that good last night, actually? Yeah, I think I am quite tired. And I'd let whatever it said on there lead how I was feeling. And like removing that's completely sort of changed that. But I think that's just something in this modern day and age where we're getting technology that sort of leads our way of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And our thoughts are so, so powerful. Our thoughts literally create a physical effect that happens in our body. So, because they're creating emotions, and emotions are in our body. And so when you're thinking like, oh, I didn't get a bad, or I got a bad night's sleep, and then you start to feel like, oh, maybe I'm a little tired today. That is essentially you manifesting in that moment tiredness, because that is what you're choosing to believe. We
Mm.
could just tell ourselves, like, I'm sure some nights that I don't get that good of sleep, you could just tell yourself, oh my gosh, if you sat there for 5 minutes, you're like, I got the best sleep of my life last night. I feel so rested and energized today. I look forward to taking on the day and conquering my task. I am superhuman and I can do anything today. You're probably going to feel a lot better than if you didn't tell yourself that, even if you didn't get a great night's sleep, because again, our
Mm.
thoughts are so powerful. So, with calorie counting, if we start to tell ourselves, oh, maybe I do need more food because the calorie counter says I need more food, or maybe I don't need it, it creates a lot of disconnect between what our body is telling us and what our thoughts are thinking based on what the tool says.
Mm. So let's look at social media. Obviously, it's this massive thing at the minute. There's loads of pros and cons for it on both sides. Around this conversation of like losing weight, eating, overeating, binge eating, binge eating, how does it affect people's minds?
So, social media, I think, has gotten worse and worse over the years, especially because I used to tell my clients, just unfollow the people that make you feel bad about yourself. Those people who are flashing their six pack abs, if every time you scroll across them, you just feel like, man, but I don't have six pack abs, unfollow them. The big problem nowadays is social media is now starting to feed us content that we don't even follow.
Mm.
But it's important to remember that our algorithms are still based on us. So the more that we engage with things, the more we're going to be shown things like that. So if you're engaging in, like, again, super health and fitness content, you're liking all those pictures with abs, you're commenting them, you're bookmarking them, your algorithm's going to show you more of them. And I think it's important to go into social media with a conscious mind, because ultimately, like, our brains are not built to be comparing ourselves to people 24/7. We used to live in very small tribes, and it was natural to kind of compare yourself then, but it didn't have the same effect because it was such a small thing. Let's say in the dating pool you had 30, 40 people to choose from, so you might compare them a little bit, but you're also seeing people, when they're dressed up for a party, but you're also seeing them in their day-to-day life. You're seeing people in real life, and so the comparison is not that extreme as when we are on social media comparing ourselves to tens of thousands of strangers who are photoshopped. And now with AI, like, we have sometimes no idea what's AI and the things that they can do in videos and shifts to our body. It is so unrealistic, but our
Mhm.
brains do not always pick up on that. So all of these comparisons, they can happen so much more often than we're built for, and at a much greater scale. And beyond that too, one kind of hot take that I have is when people are struggling with food noise, thinking about food all day, I believe a lot of that has started happening because people are using social media and they're getting told 100 different opinions within 30 minutes of eat this, don't eat this, try this tip, don't do this is bad, this is good. And when we hear all that, we get so confused. We're like, what do we even do? And then we're
Mm.
thinking about food all day. We have all these questions about food. We don't know what to do. We feel confused. We feel lost. We feel broken. And so a big thing I recommend for my clients too is if they're struggling with, of course, body image, but also just like feeling confused around food is choose like one or two or maybe three people who you really trust and follow to maybe be on social media, but like if they have a podcast, listen to their podcast. This is a shameless plug. Go listen to my Become a Confident Eater podcast and you can choose me as someone to listen to. But finding these like couple of people that you really resonate with, this will help it so it becomes less confusing. And if you ever change your mind, like this person's approach doesn't resonate with me anymore, great, go find someone else. But when we're getting constantly flooded with all of this input and information, it makes it really hard to make our own decisions around what our own unique body needs. And we're drowning out of all of this valuable wisdom and information that already exists within us.
That overload of information really confuses the human mind because it's up until this point in time, we've just not been used to taking in that amount of information in such a short time.
Mm-hmm.
How do we speak about it differently between sort of men and women? Do we change how the conversation is delivered around this subject?
I work with both men and women, and my approach is the same for both of them. We all have human brains, and we all have human brains that can form habits, and we all have human brains that can change. So I don't think it's that different. Where I do think there can be some additional struggles with women is with the social pressures. Of course, men have their own social pressures to look a certain way, and it's usually to look bigger, stronger, more muscular, whereas women are constantly told to shrink, be smaller, like make themselves tinier. So I think there's both those social pressures that we can address the same way. But I do think, of course, women in particular are always under this idea that we have to be perfect, we have to be perceived a certain way in order to be loved and valued and worthy. And so I just think it's important for women to take that additional consideration to know that it can take a little bit longer to get rid of some of these thoughts. I still have what I call like the I need to lose weight story that comes up in my brain, where I just know it doesn't really matter how much mindset work I were to do. There would still be some very small part of my brain that is going to tell me I need to keep losing weight because that is what I've been socially conditioned to believe all of my years of life and will be continue to conditionally believe probably for the rest of my life with what I see on the media, with what I hear, with what comments I receive. And that's just not something we can avoid. It's a nice aspirational goal to think that we're just going to find 100% body acceptance, but it's just not realistic when we live in a culture that doesn't value that. So what I do then is just look at it as just a story. That's why I say, oh, that's just I always need to keep losing weight story. That it's never enough. Just lose more. And when we can just recognize it as just a story that's just like an old record player going on a loop, then I don't have so much attachment to it. I don't believe it as true. I don't think, oh my gosh, this means I do need to start losing weight. I'm just like, oh, that's just a byproduct of my societal conditioning. And I can just let that play in the background and just resume my life, choosing self-love, self-kindness, self-acceptance for where I am now and where I know is my healthy, happy body weight.
Yeah. So again, it comes to the story you tell yourself, what your mind's telling you, that internal voice. So as so much of it comes from that, how can someone start to look at what's coming in, which stories are being told to yourself internally, and deciphering which ones are good, which ones are bad? Is there something, would journaling be a way to do that or something like that?
Yeah. I always ask myself to determine if a thought is helpful or not. How does this make me feel? So I think of trying on thoughts as like trying on a jacket. See how it feels on you. Is it comfortable? Does it make you uncomfortable? Is it too tight? Does it feel free and open? So if you're trying on something like a thought that may or may not be helpful, for example, I want to lose weight, right? That could be a helpful thought. It could not be a helpful thought. Think about how it makes you feel. If you feel excited and motivated and like, yes, this is going to be so fun, great. That's a helpful thought. If you try on that thought and it makes you feel discouraged and unworthy and lacking and unconfident, maybe not a helpful thought. So it's not necessarily a good or bad thought. No thoughts are. It's just, does this feel helpful to me based on how it makes me feel? And then the actions it's going to make me take. Now, if you find that the thought's not helpful, for example, I want to lose weight, it just makes me feel all discouraged and motivated. Maybe you want to think instead, I want to learn to listen and honor to my body. I want to learn how to stop overeating. I want to learn how to be kinder to myself. Those thoughts you might be like, okay, that feels a little bit better. That will be now a useful thought that will create positive feelings and drive positive actions towards your life moving forward.
And looking at your world, like the work you do, the work people you work with, comparing that to maybe what's outside of that and maybe the not so positive culture around diet and nutrition, what does success look like for you in your world versus that world?
Yeah. To me, success is being this confident eater where you can feel like you can be confident no matter what food situation you're in, no matter where you go, where you travel in the world. You feel like I can listen to my body. I can feed myself when I'm hungry. I can stop with when I'm full. I can eat mostly nutritious foods, but also some pleasure foods that feel good to me in moderation. And I can just move on with my life with food not being that big of a thing. And I think it's important for everyone to define what their own success means to them, because for a lot of people, it's just like, what's that number on the scale? But the truth is, the number on the scale is not going to make you happy or make your life truly any different if you don't have the thoughts that go along with this. And this is why I see people all the time, they'll get to that number on the scale and they still don't feel like it's enough. They still don't feel like they're happy. Their life still looks the same in every single other place. And so they're like, well, what happened? I thought I was going to be happy here. I thought I was going to have rainbows and butterflies and magical things pop up when I got to this number on the scale, and that's not happening. And it's because you didn't change your thoughts. So it's always important to make sure you're doing like the mindset work alongside your goals in order to get to where you want to go, but really defining like, what are my goals? What would truly make me happy? Is it the number on the scale, or would it be that I feel like my husband tells me that I'm beautiful and that's what I really want? That's what would make me happy, is feeling loved and accepted by him. Is it that I really want to lose weight, or is that I want to stop feeling so drained and unenergized every day and feel like I can't like get through the workday? That maybe focusing on that might make me actually happy. So it's like looking like, what would the weight loss give me, and focusing on those as like, okay, that's going to be my measure of success that I want to look for. What will change in my life?
Amber, coming to a close then, one of the things I like to do at the end of an episode is leave the listener with a question to go away and have a conversation about what they've listened to. So if you could leave the listener with a question that they could take to a friend, a family member, or even a stranger to start a conversation around this topic, what would that question be?
If it were to be a journal question, I would want people to ask themselves, what part of me still wants to keep eating this way? This is a really powerful question because there is some part of you in your unconscious mind that wants to keep doing this. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. So it's important to address that part of you, because that's a part that you often see people getting stuck in, is they're like trying to make changes, but there's a part of them that still kind of wants to binge. And if you can address that, then we can start to look at why you're getting stuck. So for example, this might look like, part of me thinks it's fun. Part of me thinks it's pleasurable. Part of me thinks it gives me a break from like all of the hard things in my day. Once we can call that out, then we can see if it's true. Is it true that binge eating is fun? And like, see what comes up with your honest instinct to that. And then I want you to, next time you binge, look at the whole experience and be like, was that fun? Can I like compare this to something that I love that I do think is fun? I don't know, going to jump in a swimming pool. That I can say is for sure fun. How does that compare to my experience of binge eating? And then you can clearly see that the binge eating is not fun. It is painful. And we need to start telling ourselves that true story. Binge eating is never fun. It is never pleasurable. It brings us a lot more pain than it ever does joy. And when we can start telling ourselves the truth about that, we become awake to it and we say, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. It feels so much easier to let go of. One more thing I'll give you for the show notes is I have a guided urge audio that I call a Stop a Binge audio. And this is an audio you can listen to anytime you are getting these strong cravings. I walk you through a really clear visualization that's going to help you visualize what happens if I do binge. This will also help show your brain that full picture. I call it telling yourself the whole story, because we usually say, chapter 1, I eat, it's delicious, the end. That's not what happens. There's chapters 2 through 10 where like all of the negative effects come in. And if we can show your brain through visualization, which our brain does not know the difference between a real and imagined in-depth experience. So if we can show our brain the pain of it, then it will remember it more. And we can also show it the pleasure of not overeating, of like when we sit through the urge and we rewire our brain and we feel really good through the rest of the day. So I'd also recommend listening to that audio, because that can help cement in the truth about binge eating and really help you let go of some of the ways you think it might be serving you.
Yeah. Awesome. Amber, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been really wonderful. Loads of valuable insights that I've taken away and hopefully for the listener as well. Where can they find you online if they want to keep up to date with what you're doing?
Yes, you can find me, all my resources at theconfidenteater.org. So that's where you can also find my audio. My podcast is called Become a Confident Eater. I have an Instagram, The Confident Eater, and I have a free Facebook support group called Become a Confident Eater. Really, search The Confident Eater. I'm everywhere there. And thanks so much for having
Sorted.
me on today, Sam.
That's my pleasure. I'll link it all below so anyone listening can just scroll down. And to the listener, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do share it with someone who you think would find some value from it. If you haven't already, do follow the show and share it with friends. It really helps it grow. And lastly from me, thank you for listening and stay curious. I'll see you in the next one.